Hi, it's Nick from Punkandola here. I thought now would be a good time for us to take a look at what we anticipate the likely impact of COVID-19 being on diversity and inclusion, because now more than ever, it is critical that we double down our efforts on diversity and inclusion if we don't want to lose momentum and if we don't want to backtrack on the progress that we've made in the last 10 years or the last decade since the last financial crash. COVID-19 is clearly having a huge impact on pretty much everybody's lives in pretty much every way. And that is especially true when you take a look through a diversity lens at what's going on. In particular, there are four main ways that we can see COVID-19 is already going to have an impact or already is having an impact. The first of those is through the 0 hours contract system. So many organisations, quite understandably, have needed to cut off their employees who are on 0 hours contracts. And that is a diversity and inclusion issue because we know that people from BAME backgrounds are overrepresented on 0 hours contracts. So there's our first impact right there. Secondly, we also know that COVID-19 has had a significant impact on some sectors more than others. In particular, when you think about retail and services. In fact, there's some really interesting research out by the IFS looking at the sectors that are hardest hit. And what is coming through quite clearly there is that women are overrepresented in those sectors. They're overrepresented in retail, they're overrepresented in services. And so you can see another financial impact coming from a diversity and inclusion angle because of COVID-19. The third area where we can see this coming up over the horizon is as organisations unfortunately move into decisions around having to make redundancies. Research into previous financial crashes have told us that there are some groups who are disproportionately affected by those redundancy decision-making processes, and those are women, those are part-time workers, and again, people from BAME backgrounds. And that's why it is critical if your organisation is starting to look at redundancy processes that you make those processes as bias-free and as clean as possible. And you can see some great insights and hints and tips on how to do that in Binner's recent article. The fourth area, though, that I wanted to flag is it's not just about looking at individual decisions or managerial decisions during this time, but it's also about the importance of looking at the big macro level decisions that are taking place. A good example of that is the announcement of suspending gender pay gap reporting for this year. Now, clearly, organisations are under huge pressure at the moment. I totally get that. However, suspending gender pay gap reporting really does send the message that diversity and inclusion isn't business critical. It's a nice to have. Now, there are lots and lots and lots of organisations out there who, in all of their mantras, will say that diversity and inclusion is important to them, it's important to the way that they do business. And if they start to row back from having diversity and inclusion as a priority during this time, then they are also sending the message that actually D&I isn't mission critical, it's a nice to have. What organisations focus on, what they prioritise, what they spend their time doing during this crisis is genuinely what's important to them. And employees will see that and external people will see that as well. So really, I wanted to wrap this up with thinking about calls for action and what we need to do at the moment. If you are a D&I practitioner out there, if you are heading up diversity and inclusion, if you support diversity and inclusion work in your organisations, if you're a senior sponsor for D&I, then really now is the time to make sure that D&I is definitely on the agenda, because if it slips off now, when you come back, when things have all recovered and you start to look at it again, it will look like lip service. So, calls to action then. Obviously, when we're making our own decisions in organisations going forward, we need to make sure that we are being as bias-free as possible. Secondly, we need to check that our decisions in our organisations aren't having a disproportionate impact on some groups more than others. We need to run the statistics on decisions that are being made. And thirdly, and perhaps most importantly, look at what your organisation is paying attention to right now. If it doesn't include diversity and inclusion, it really needs to make that message clear. D&I is critical, business critical for us. I'd love to know your thoughts and your perspectives on this. Let me know your thinking in the comments below, and thanks for listening.